Hi everyone, this is Lily Amond. As some of you may recall, I did a previous video called Top 12 Barbie Villains, and some people commented that the list was missing a few important people. While I hadn't seen Barbie in the Nutcracker yet at the time of making that video, and had completely forgotten about Magic of Pegasus and Rapunzel, I found myself wishing I hadn't left those villains out of the list, because they were honestly pretty memorable, especially Gothel and Winlock. So I decided to revise the list, and rework the format in the process. Firstly, the list is now going to divide into two parts, main villains and secondary villains. Second, I'm going to discuss why I put each villain where I put them on my list. I also did a bit of reshuffling when it comes to the order of the villains on the list, as some of my opinions have shifted or changed a bit over the course of time. Disclaimer, I do not own any of the movies, villains, photos, and music used and or talked about in this video. So I'm going to start with my main villains list, and I'll start at the bottom and work my way up from there. That said, let's get right into number 15, Jacqueline. To be honest, I've never thought Jacqueline was very memorable. I didn't even really care for her all that much, or like her, but I didn't hate her either. She was just sort of meh. I suppose I should talk about her role in the film, so here's a quick summary. Jacqueline is a fashion designer who, rather than create original designs, copies other designers in order to get ahead in her career and be better than the rest. This is basically what she does during the film, and it's her motivation for kidnapping the Flaries. In fact, it's her sole motivation for doing so. When you think about it, it's a pretty weak motive in comparison to the others on this list. And at the end of the film, Jacqueline redeems herself and apologizes for her actions, ending her status as a villain. I don't know that there's really much else to say about this character, so moving on to number 14, Dame Devin. Okay, Dame Devin's a bit more likable and villainous than Jacqueline was, and I enjoyed watching her a lot more as a result. I can't say Charm School is one of my favorite Barbie movies out there, but she was one of its virtues. Her end goal is a lot like Ariana's, in that she wants to put her daughter on the throne so that she herself can attain power. The difference, though, is that Ariana does this a lot better. Overall, she's a decent villain in my opinion, but far superior ones exist, such as number 13, the Mouse King. The Mouse King is the villain of Barbie and the Nutcracker. He was one of the villains absent from my original list, which is a shame, because he's a good villain. He's also voiced by Tim Curry, which is pretty awesome. I think the reason he's so low on the list now is because he never left much of an impression on me, and I don't know why either, because I don't see anything wrong with his character, and again, he's a good villain. Number 12, Raquel from the Barbie Diaries. While she becomes friends with Barbie in Very Secret, she's practically unrecognizable there from her Barbie Diaries counterpart, because she wasn't bad in Very Secret or Fashion Fairy Tale at all compared to what she's like in Barbie Diaries. Here, she's a complete bitch, yet one of the villains you really love to hate. She's an awesome character in general to me. There are definitely a lot of stronger villains out there, some of which came out before her in earlier films, but she's still a great villain. Number 11, Gothel. Gothel is the villain of Barbie as Rapunzel, and this version of Gothel is probably my second favorite, my first favorite being the one from Disney's Tangled. She's also the second villain who was missing from my previous list, and again, I apologize for that. I don't know why I forgot about her. There is no explanation I can give for that one that can justify it. But anyway, I know people have made this comparison before, but she kind of reminds me of Lydia Preminger in a lot of ways, from Cinderella. Watch the movie and look for signs. You'll pick up on it too, if you haven't already, that is. Number 10, Eris. Eris is actually a very interesting villain, with a cool backstory if you think about it. She's already a member of the royal family, but she's different from them because she can't spin Marilia, the life force of the sea. That is in fact the biggest reason for her anger and jealousy, and it's kinda cool to see a villain already in power in one of these movies and not just trying to gain it. We see how Eris runs Oceania, and we see why it's a bad idea to let her continue. Something I'd like to comment on, even though I've done so before, is the ending of Mermaid Tale 2, where Eris is given legs by her own nightmare spell. It would have been interesting to see how her life as a human would have turned out, especially since she can still breathe underwater and everything. If they ever make a Mermaid Tale 3, they'd better touch on Eris' status as a human and how it's going for her. Number 9, Rowena. Rowena is probably the easiest villain on this list to hate because she's quite evil and actually succeeds in her plan for a minute. She gets King Randolph to hand over the crown to her until he's better, and then because of the poison she'd been giving him, he actually dies. Lacey brings him back, of course, but it still counts as a temporary success on Rowena's part. Philippe, from the Three Musketeers, is at number 8. And I have to specify what film this character is from, because there are actually 2 Philippes. This one and the one from Barbie and Her Sisters in a Ponytail. And in case you couldn't tell, that one did not make the list. I mean, he wasn't horrible, but... Anyway, this Philippe is the second Barbie villain to be voiced by Tim Curry, and his performance was wonderful. He was a bit over the top, but so was the Mouse King, and to me that was what made them both fun. I honestly can't think of a flaw in Curry's performance. Something I do wonder, though, is why he didn't kill Corinne sooner, or try and get rid of Corinne sooner. I mean, you find out pretty quick that he's the villain, and he sees her constantly getting in the way of Louis' assassination, so why doesn't he just kill her first? Besides the fact that it's a kid's film, of course. Number 7, Queen Ariana. This is another villain with an interesting backstory, and she's also got a pretty decent villain song, which I tried to do a cover of, and will be redoing because it was awful. You can find it on my other channel, Midnight Amethyst. Anyway, she's truly horrible, but she's also entertaining and, believe it or not, likable. On top of just wanting power, she also wants revenge. Her family was screwed over by the king, although for good reason, since they tried to kill him and his wife. And she's out to get the royal family in retaliation. She almost succeeds, as has become a pattern, before being defeated by Rosella and the others. But nevertheless, she is one awesome villain. Number 6, Henna. Henna is the villain of the first Mariposa movie, and she's a bit like Laverna in some ways, but doesn't seem to plan things out nearly as well. Besides that, though, she's wonderful to watch, is great at keeping up a facade until the end, and she does very, very nearly succeed with her plan. In addition, she doesn't really seem to have it out for Mariposa herself all that much, even trying multiple times to convince her to join up with her. To me, Henna only sees Mariposa as an enemy because Mariposa got in the way of Marabella's death. Number 5, Laverna. Laverna is the villain of all 3 Fairytopia movies and is probably one of the most evil. I say one of because there are a few doozies on this list. But apart from that, she plans everything out so well that it seems like the only reason her plans fail is because of Alina's interference. Obviously, this would happen since Alina is the hero, but you get some villains whose plans are so flawed they were bound to fail regardless. But that's far from the case with Laverna. She even finds ways to counter her previous defeats, and it takes 3 films to completely defeat her. My only complaint is how she went out at the end of the last Fairytopia film. It seemed to have a note of uncertainty, almost like you aren't supposed to be sure if she's really gone. Which brings me to my question, why don't they make a 4th film and have the apprentices become guardians, thus giving Laverna at least somewhat of a reason to go after them again? And while we're on it, they should also make a bunch of prequel stories for the other apprentices, since we've already seen Alina's story up to this point. I'd love to see Lumina's and Lyndon's for sure. Even with all of that though, there is no denying Laverna's awesomeness. And I know I say that about a lot of these villains, but it's the truth. Number 4, Wenlock. Wenlock is from Barbie and the Magic of Pegasus, and is the 3rd villain I left out of my first list. I feel quite bad that I forgot about him because he's actually a very memorable and enjoyable villain. I mean, he just oozes charisma. He's a little different. I don't think he necessarily wants power. His goal seems much more matrimonial. Whenever his current wife gets too quote-unquote annoying for him, he curses her and then seeks out another. He just happened to choose Brianna and then Annika years later. Them being royalty just seems like a bonus for him. Number 3, Rothbart. Barbie of Swan Lake was based on the ballet, and Rothbart is the main villain of both versions of the story, as well as another one Mattel did, but I'll get to that in a minute. He was voiced by Kelsey Grammer, and he's just as enjoyable on screen as many of the other villains on this list. And it's interesting to see his relationship with his daughter Odile over the course of the film. He spoils her like you wouldn't believe, and seems to care very much for her. But close to the end, when no one When one of his spells backfires and turns her into a pig, he actually deems chasing Odette and the others more important than trying to help his daughter. Not to mention turning a bunch of elves, a troll named Erasmus, and Odette herself into animals on purpose, and then leaving Erasmus for dead to pursue Odette and by extension the magic crystal. Truthfully, I have not seen the original ballet, and I didn't care much for Barbie in the pink shoes, but I absolutely adore this film and its villain. Number 2, Seymour Kreider, from Barbie as the Princess and the Pop Star. You might be surprised by this choice, but here it is. Even though Kreider seems like he'd just be a modern version of Preminger, and in a way he kind of is, his character's actually quite different in a lot of ways as well. He doesn't plan things out as well as Preminger does, and he doesn't intend to steal the valuable thing he's after, in this case the gardenia, until a bit later in the film, whereas Preminger's got that in mind right out of the gate. Kreider also seems a bit more childish, but not in an overly annoying way like Rupert, in my opinion. In general, he's pretty freaking cool. And number 1, Lydia and Preminger. Honestly, how could I not keep these two at the top of the list? They're the best villains. And once again, I couldn't decide which one of them I liked better, so they tied. I should talk about each one separately though, just to keep organized. So let's start with Preminger. Firstly, he's voiced by Martin Short, and to be honest, I have yet to see Martin Short act badly in a film. Second, he has a kick-ass villain song, not to mention a reprise later on, and as a villain, he's just awesome. You can tell he's got everything planned out, like Laverna, and when things go wrong, he's able to figure out solutions and alternate plans almost on the fly, and while his end goal is a common one in these films, to be the ruler of a kingdom, he very nearly succeeds, again, much like Laverna. He's charismatic, funny, entertaining, and villainous, which is why he's in the number 1 spot. But remember, he has to share it. And speaking of which, let's talk about Lydia. And in case I haven't made it obvious enough, I love this character to pieces. I will even admit to her being one of my fictional crushes at one point in time. She's a talented musician, as seen in the film, and is even a pretty good vocalist, although we only heard about 35 seconds of her singing. That 35 seconds was awesome, though. As a villain, she, like Preminger, is able to come up with new schemes in practically 2 seconds if things go wrong, and the only reason her plan failed, in the end, was because Melody got to the muse's instruments before she could destroy them. Then, the girls repelled her own magic back at her, turning her to stone. But I didn't want her story to end there, oh no, which is why I wrote Breaking the Spell, a Diamond Castle fanfiction over on Wattpad. I wanted Lydia to have a happy ending. I'm even considering writing her a backstory. Let me know if you guys would be interested in reading that down in the comments section. Now, I'm gonna go on to my list of secondary antagonists, and I'll be going the opposite direction this time, starting with number 1, Nick and Knack. These two are at the very top of the list for good reason. They're hilarious. Not only do they play off each other very well, but they also help Preminger a great deal with his plan, and are pretty much essential to the plot, because they're the only ones mining all the gold Preminger's stealing from the royal mine. On top of that, their interactions with both each other and other characters make for some really entertaining moments throughout the film. You are never going to forget these guys after seeing them on screen, trust me. Number 2, Slider. Honestly, Slider's just as funny as Nick and Knack are, although he's not nearly as important to the plot. He does have his key moments though, like being responsible for the destruction of Liana and Alexa's home, and being the one to sense Melody singing. And he has some pretty funny moments, and is interesting enough, so in my book he's deserved his spot on the list. Number 3, Otto. Man, this character's great. Probably not as funny as the others, but he makes up for that by his usefulness when it comes to Gothel's villainy. He informs her of Rapunzel's trip to the village, which she would not have known about if he hadn't brought it to her attention. He seems to have it out for Hobie, threatening to eat him on several occasions. Number 4, Fungus Maximus. Alright, this guy should have been in the Fairytopia series right from the beginning. He's such a good antagonist. The fact that he didn't appear until the second film Begs the question of when Laverna crossed paths with him, since at the end of the first film she was banished to the bogs of the hinterland. Is that where she met him? I don't know. But aside from that, he's much more intelligent than the other fungi, and he also clearly has a thing for Laverna, which is unrequited. This makes for some interesting moments throughout the third and second films. Number 5, Odile, Swan Lake. She may be annoying, but she's also earned her spot on this list. As far as antagonism, Odile's got it down, being one of the most spoiled and bratty characters of a Barbie film I have ever seen. But I like her despite all that, so here she is. Number 6, Midas. Okay, Midas is one of the best non-human sidekicks in this franchise. I mean it, he's great. Even though he didn't have much to do with the main plot at all, the screen time he gets is such pure freaking gold that you don't care. His personality was very entertaining, as well as his interactions with everyone else in the film, especially Serafina and Wolfie. Despite his villain status, I can't help but love this dog. Number 7, Desmond. Honestly, I like this guy. The only person he's not aggressive or threatening toward is Rowena, and that is clearly because he's in love with her. Other than being a jerk and having unrequited feelings for Rowena, however, I didn't get much personality out of him. But that was because he didn't seem to get nearly as much screen time as anyone else, even the damn monkey. So I can't hold that against him. And to be honest, with 12 heroes and a crap ton of other characters, it's no wonder not all of them are entirely fleshed out. But anyway, let's move on to number 8, Brutus the monkey. As mentioned, Brutus got tons of screen time, and unlike with another non-human side character, or 4, I didn't mind one bit. He's hilarious. The only reason I put him lower than Desmond on the list is because he seemed a bit less significant to the plot, despite having more screen time. Don't get me wrong, Rowena wouldn't have found the girls without Brutus, but that's really one of the major things he does that I can remember. Feel free to correct me in the comments if you need to, and give me a moment to correct myself, because, actually, when you think about it, Rowena could have found the girls on her own. She could have gone into the room to see if they'd come back or something. And then she could have noticed, like Derek, she could have noticed the shoe polish instead of having Brutus be involved. And then the only thing he does that I can't replace with something else by somebody else is when he attacks Felix after he goes, I better warn them about Desmond. It's gotta be Brutus there, but that's the only thing. The thing with finding the girls, again, Rowena could have done herself. But I've got no problem with that. Brutus is pretty cool. Feel free to leave your input in the comments, like I said. In the meantime, number 9, Don and Regan from the Barbie Diaries. They're not as strong as some of the other characters on this section of the list, but Regan and Don are still pretty good. Since this is a high school setting, they're portrayed to be much more human and complex. I mean, they behave like a lot of teenage girls you'd find in high schools in real life. They're less catty than Raquel, and you actually see a nicer side of them when Barbie hangs out with them. Of course, they turn on her later, but the point remains. They forgive her for the whole story thing in the end, and even socialize a bit with Tia and Courtney. They might not be overly villainous, but they are definitely human and definitely worthy of this list. Number 10, Alistair. I really like Alistair's sarcasm, and I find it funny that he's one of those sidekicks who will just kiss up to whoever's most powerful, even if they might hate whoever it is. You know, like Stain from Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland. And in my opinion, he was leagues better than Remo from the first film, who didn't even make the list since he didn't seem like much of an antagonist anyway. He seemed to work for Eris only because he had to. But back to Alistair. His interactions with Kylie were some of my favorites, especially in his introductory scene. That was all thanks to his aforementioned sarcasm. Number 11, Rupert. You know, thinking about it, he seems like a kind of modern mix of Nick and Knack, but he's not funny at all, and he really only qualifies as a secondary villain, now that I'm thinking about it, because of his working alongside Kreider. He seems, I don't know, too nice to be a villain at all. And on top of that, we gotta bring up the point I mentioned earlier, his annoying childishness. I said Kreider didn't really have, he was childish, but wasn't annoying. Rupert, sorry man, but it was annoying with him. Some moments were fine. Like that whole sequence when they were trying to get the door open to the garden in the castle. That was kind of funny. I'll give them that. But I don't know. Rupert, I liked him because he was super just nice, and he had a little bit of charisma to him. I'll give him that. But he wasn't funny. And he wasn't really antagonistic. Outside of the sense that he worked alongside Kreider. Number 12. Ski sites. These guys are important to the plot for sure, but they are not funny, and they're mostly played for unsuccessful laughs, rather than seeming like a legitimate threat most of the time. They do have their threatening moments, but even then, they're weak ones. I can't say I enjoyed these guys much at all, but they're alright, I guess. Number 13. Delphine. I don't know. I can't... Honestly, I just find this character kind of annoying most of the time. She's not too bad, I guess, but there's not much I can really say about her either. Number 14. Brutus the Dog. Okay, the first thing that comes to mind is the fact that they reused his name, like they have a habit of doing with a lot of people. However, this Brutus is not a monkey, he's a dog. And he seems to really only exist so Miette can have a rival too. He does practically nothing. At least the other Brutus had more purpose than that. Only by a little bit. And he was genuinely funny and entertaining to watch. This guy is just there. All he does to Corinne is steal and attempt to destroy her letter of recommendation. Oh, and sorry, he leads her to Madame de Bassé, where she gets her job and meets the others, and the whole rest of the movie happens. But they could have found a way to do that wasn't involving the dog. I really just don't care about his character at all. I'm sorry. The voice actor did a good job, but I just... And finally, number 15, Nat, Pat, and Matt. These three rats are at the bottom of the list, not only because they annoy me a bit, but because they're completely pointless. Literally, the only thing they do is sprinkle sunset herb in the other animals' food, and even then, Ariana could have just bribed someone to do that for her. Like, oh, I don't know, the guard she bribed to throw the protagonists overboard while they were leaving on that ship? These rats do not need to exist at all. I don't even like them, to be perfectly honest, and their song is just painful. Thank goodness it's the shortest song in the film. Really, I just wish it didn't exist at all, but that's just me. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and forgive me if I left anyone out. I don't think I'll be revising this list a third time. Or a second time, I mean, whichever way you want to look at it. Anybody else who hasn't made the list, I left out on purpose this time. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video regardless of any mistakes I might have made in, my speech, or just, stumbling over my words. Pauses, that kind of thing. But, yeah, leave a like and subscribe if you wish. Just, yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!